She stays up all night to
But
watch
it's
our
like a
program.
9-hour time difference from here.
She's always there. We often scold her. Right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. What a thrill it is to have. Oh, good. More people. Do come and join us. Thank you, virtual audience, for coming out. I'm so pleased to have Julie Clark back. I think this you've been here for all three of your books, haven't you?
No, just the
Which
last
one did
two.
we
This
miss?
last flight came out during COVID, so we weren't doing any events.
Didn't we do a virtual event?
Probably.
I think
You're
we did.
probably
No,
right,
I'm sure we did
yeah.
because we sold. It was the first mystery club
Yes.
pick and all that other good stuff. Kimberly, am I right that this is your first appearance?
First time.
You have to use no microphone. Sorry, it's for the camera.
My first
Otherwise, they
time.
can't hear you.
Okay.
Right. So, first thing we should do is congratulate Kimberly, who has won an Edgar Award for The Paris Wife. So,
Yeah, thank you.
very exciting. Right. So, how was it? Tell us about the ceremony in New York.
It was amazing. It was my first time ever going to the Edgars, so I had no idea what to expect. But it was a huge banquet and celebration, and when they called my name, I almost fell off my chair. It was so amazing.
So do all, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Edgar Allan Poe Awards are given by the Mystery Writers of America every year. The British crime writers do their awards called Dagger Awards. Australian crime writers do theirs, and that's called the Ned Kelly Awards, named after Australia's most famous outlaw. And Canada does one, and I'm trying to remember, but the name of it, the Arthur Ellis Award, and it's named after Canada's hangman. And it used to be a pretty gruesome trophy because it actually had, a hangman, the gallows, the noose.
Amazing.
I know, it really was. I mean, Kathy Reichs won it, whatever, and I've seen some of them, but I think they may have updated that in terms of a more modern sensibility. But basically, this is, kind of like the Oscars for writers of crime fiction.
And they've been doing it for 80 years now. So, they've, yeah.
And the little Edgar is actually kind of an ugly guy. It's,
He's a funny little statue.
Yeah, he is. Right.
But he
At
looks
one
great on my
point, I've
shelf.
always loved this. I have an Edgar, but it actually isn't intended to be an Edgar. It was the Raven Award. The Mystery Writers of America, because I'm not an author, has given me 2 awards, and one is the Raven Award for being a bookseller, and the other was, I'm trying to remember what, for being a publisher. But anyway, when I won the Raven Award and I went up to the podium, everybody's congratulating me, they announced very shamefacedly they'd forgotten to order my Raven.
Oh, no.
And so they asked me if I would accept an Edgar statue in his place. So what could I say, right? So I said, sure. So some years later, I got a note from the Mystery Writers of America saying, we're sending you the Raven, they said, and we want you to return your Edgar. And I said, what Edgar? So it's in my library. And when I do events from my library, you can see my Edgar sort of twinkling overhead. But that's why I know he's kind of an ugly little guy.
Yeah, I wouldn't give him back either.
No, I'm not. No, never. It's all right. I mean, if they couldn't order it, then too bad, right? That's the way it goes. But anyway, the Paris Wife. So as you will determine, since this new book, The Expat Affair, is set in Amsterdam, that Kimberly likes to write international suspense. Julie writes American suspense, and she's truly wicked. And what she likes, you are. What she likes is multiple narrative voices in her books. So they're interesting to read because you have different points of view telling you the story. 3 principal ones, I think, in the Ghostwriter, right? And you want to hold up and show off this beautiful packaging for your book because it really is gorgeous.
It is beautiful. We have the sprayed edges that go
Right.
all the way around. And
Yeah.
if you look
See?
at the cover, the flames,
What about the end papers? Are
no, they're
no?
not anything
But,
special.
it's inside. It almost looks like Halloween.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I think it's gorgeous, and this is something that those of you who get our newsletter know that I write to you, and I call it shelf wealth. I mean, if you're going to buy a hardcover book, why don't you get one that's extra pretty, right? That has some kind of neat packaging.
Yeah, and it's only this first print run, so
Right.
once this is out, they're not redoing it. So you all are going to get a very special. It will be worth millions of dollars in like
Don't sell it
a
on eBay.
100 years. So make sure you leave a note in it for your grandkids. Don't put it to Goodwill.
Did you have any input at all?
I did. We fought for this cover. I fought for this cover. They wanted it to be. They sent me a bunch of ideas, and most of them were like a house with a light on in the attic, or like a dark road looked down from above with a car and headlights. And I was like, I don't know what this is. So we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I think they were getting frustrated with me and I was getting frustrated with them. And so I loved the cover of The Last Flight. And so I finally got so frustrated, I just went over to my shelf, pulled it down, looked on the inside flap to see who the cover artist was for that, went to her website and started shopping. And this was a mock-up that she had done of Fahrenheit 451. And when I saw it, I was like, that's my book cover. And so I sent it to my agent, who also said, yes, that's your book cover. And we sent it off to Sourcebooks. We had a big old meeting about it. And, they were like, well, we'll test market it. And I was like, okay. And and then we got off the Zoom.
Everybody loved it.
And I don't know, but I told my agent, like, you need to go back and be like, buy it. You have to buy it because that's the cover. And so they did, thankfully.
So Kimberly has a really wonderful cover too. Tell us the saga of your cover before we actually
I
get
had
into the
drama
books.
too, but I was not as involved in this particular version of the cover. But they came with I've blocked it out. I couldn't even tell you what it was because it was so bad. And we went back and forth a bunch of times with it, and they kept trying to change it and fix it. And finally, they scrapped it and came with this. And I was like, done. We're done.
Yeah.
Like, stop everything now because this was it. Yeah.
You might be surprised to know that covers and titles are the two most contentious things generally. And in both cases, the publisher has absolute control over that. They may want to talk to the author, but the author owns the copyright to the words, and the publisher owns the copyright to the whole rest of it. And they used to have, back in the days, old days, in-house art departments where they would work in-house. But now, mostly, they buy covers from, and the covers are licensed, which means once upon a time, Tony Hillerman's cover guy, we sold the prints of the cover here in the bookstore because HarperCollins had a license to use the artist's covers on Tony Hillerman's books, but the artist was okay with making prints and doing all. So at one point, we had this whole drape of Tony Hillerman covers all across this part of the store, and people would come in and shop for them, and it was great. So that's how I learned that is true, that the publisher really owns, the packaging, right? So, but they consulted you, so that was good.
Yes, I mean, it's in our contract that we get to be consulted, and we do have a say. And publishers generally don't want their authors to be unhappy, so they will work really hard to make us happy. And with the right kind of pressure, we can usually get what we want.
Well, or if you're forceful.
Yes.
Right. Oh, there's the puppy. See? Whoop, he left. We were talking about our puppies, and he flashed by on the screen. So in alphabetical order, because that seems to be the better way to go here, Kimberly, I know you've read each other's books and you can talk to each other, but why don't you go first and tell us a little bit about the Expat Affair?
Oh, good. I was so hoping you wouldn't ask me to tell this one. I've read it. I love it, but I don't remember anybody's names.
Me neither.
So the Expat Affair is about two American women, both of them expats in Amsterdam. Raina, who the story opens, and she's waking up the morning after a date with a man, and she finds him dead on the floor of the shower, obviously murdered. And his safe has been emptied out. It was full of diamonds. He works in the diamond industry in Holland. And she is basically the main prime suspect. So for a crime that she didn't commit. So while she's working to clear her name in this place where she's brand new, doesn't speak the language, doesn't know how anything works, her path crosses with a woman named Willow, who has been there a little bit longer. She's married to a Dutch man. They have a child together. But Willow has secrets of her own to protect. And, both of the women are kind of in this place, like, who do you trust in a foreign country a city thousands and thousands of miles from home. But they're both going to have to learn really quick. They're going to have to figure it out really quick in order to survive.
So, Amsterdam, why did you choose? I already know the answer to this. Never ask a question to which you don't know the answer. Why did you choose Amsterdam for this story?
So it is actually my second home. My husband is Dutch. We lived there for years and years. Both my kids were born there. I'm half Dutch. I have a passport, and it is just an amazing, gorgeous city. If anybody here has ever been, it's like walking through a postcard, but at the same time, it's also very, especially in the winter when this story takes place, it's dark, it's wet, it's rainy, there are lots of very narrow alleyways that lead to scary places. It has the beauty juxtaposed with like this, um, not danger. It's not a dangerous place at all, but it could be for someone who is in a position like Raina, who, doesn't know anybody, doesn't know who to call, doesn't know even if you can call 911. Is that a thing in Europe? So I just thought it was a great starting point for a thriller.
And certainly, diamonds are one of the lifebloods of the Dutch economy, right? Or at least the Amsterdam economy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a big diamond industry there. A lot of it has moved to Antwerp, but there are a couple of really big diamond houses in Amsterdam. And, rich people behaving badly is always a great place to start for any thriller.
Well, and if you watch Succession, you know that rich families, the whole dynastic dynamic about, who's going to inherit and, who's going to let go of power and all the rest of it is a big part of the story.
Yeah, and that's super fun to write. Just the sibling rivalry and who's taking over, and that's just a blast to write.
Your turn.
Okay. The Ghostwriter is the story of a ghostwriter, and her name is Olivia Dumont, and she has made a name for herself in the writing community as sort of a ghostwriter who promotes women who are breaking the glass ceiling in their chosen fields. And she has just exploded her career with an spur of the moment comment that gets her canceled, and nobody wants to work with her anymore. And she's on the verge of having to sell her house. And her agent calls her and says, I got this really weird job for you if you want to take it. Vincent Taylor wants you to ghostwrite his last novel. And Vincent Taylor is this very famous horror author who lives in Ojai. And but what he's even more famous for is that he was the only suspect in the brutal murder of his older brother and younger sister in 1975. And Olivia does not want to take this job, not because she doesn't write fiction, which she doesn't, but because Vincent Taylor is her father. And nobody in the world knows that except for Vincent and her, basically. Her partner doesn't know. Her agent doesn't know. Nobody knows. She cut him out of her life a long time ago and never wanted to go back. But she knows that there's always strings attached with her dad, and she needs the money. So she decides to go up to Ojai and see what's going on and to basically tell him no. Until she finds out that it's not his last novel that he wants her to write. It is the memoir of what actually happened in 1975, because after 50 years of silence, he's finally ready to tell what really happened. And Olivia knows that she's the one that has to write that book because she's the only one who can tell when her father is lying. So that's the Ghostwriter.
It's so good.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is. So who are the multiple narrators in this story?
We are with Olivia in the present day, and her father, Vincent, is a big thorn in her side. He is newly diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, so he's highly unreliable. He has hallucinations. And for a man who has guarded his secrets very, very closely for the past 50 years, it's a terrifying thing to be out of control of what you say and when you say it and who you say it to. But in the past, we are with 16-year-old Vincent and 15-year-old Poppy, who unfortunately dies it's not a spoiler. She's dead at the beginning of the book. But we go back in time to 1975, and we get to see sort of the months leading up to the murders and what was going on in the house between the brothers, Danny and Vincent, and between Vincent and Poppy and Danny and Poppy, and things were pretty bad and pretty tense. So, Olivia never really wanted to believe that her dad had murdered them, but as she starts to talk to him and as she starts to dig a little bit, she realizes that he very well could have.
It's really, how many books rely on the idea that teenagers do really dumb things?
I believe that is called reality. Teenagers do really dumb things. I can attest as a former teenager.
Right, but I mean, to go back and get into the head of these teenagers, you realize, how hard it is for kids to make decisions. Do they trust adults? If they do, does that lead to a good place or a bad place? And, I think we're a little more open now about some of the problems that in 1975 weren't too easily discussed.
No, and also in 1975, kids had an incredible amount of freedom. And I wanted to set the book in Ojai because Ojai was just a very quiet, small rural town in 1975. It wasn't sort of the transplant mecca that it is now of, rich Santa Barbara citizens and LA superstars driving up for their weekend, compound time. It really was a sleepy little rural town. And the kids there just roamed free, hitchhiked, did all of these things, got drunk in the woods and got high in the woods and, did all of these
tracking
things.
Available.
No, there wasn't.
No.
And parenting was different. So the Taylor kids, their parents were distant. They weren't hands-on. Mom drank too much. Dad worked. And if they were in the house at 11 o'clock, great. And if you weren't in the house at 11 o'clock, you were sleeping outside.
So, in Amsterdam, would a similarly casual attitude have prevailed with teenagers?
Well, it's funny. So, my kids, when we lived there, they were little. They were, I think our son was 9 when we moved back to the States. And then he went back for college and stayed there. But the kids in Holland, I think Holland is, last I saw the list, like 3rd happiest place on earth. And it's because the kids have so much freedom. Like when our son was, 6, 7, 8, he would roam kind of. I mean, controlled roaming, but like he would get on his bike and drive and go to his friend's house at like 7, 8 years old. And I mean, yeah, they have a lot more freedom there. It's kind of like it used to be here, I think.
I was going to say I was doing that at that age, but my kids were not doing that at that age.
No, I can remember when I was a kid, we could get up on Saturday morning before anybody was around and off on the bike for the whole day, bicycling all over the North Shore of Chicago, down to the lake, whatever. There wasn't nearly as much fear about what might happen to children, but there really wasn't any tracking system available. So you sort of depended on other adults if your child got into trouble to help them out.
And one of the things that helps in Holland, too, is the driving age is 18 rather than 16, and there's so much public transportation. So the kids are going out when, the drinking age is officially 18, but I think everybody's drinking earlier than that. But, they're not in cars. They're on buses and trams and on bikes. And, it's a very different kind of world than here.
So you chose to put 2 Americans into this. I mean, the 2 women that are at the heart of the story are both Americans one of them has been there for a while, is married into a family, but the other one, what's she coming from? She's kind of trying to escape something.
She's escaping a really bad divorce and has kind of gone a little off the deep end in her very small hometown and is, just wanting to get away and start over. So she goes there really looking for a fresh start and to become a person who maybe people don't know her past and what she's done. And so, but she gets there and realizes that, there's freedom in that, but there's also, some risks that she's taking, especially when she finds a dead man in the shower. Like, she has no support system, so she has to figure out how to find her way all by herself without anyone around.
So we're talking teenagers in your book, but there is a child at the heart of your book, a young child. Um, I have very mixed emotions about what's going to become of him, so we're not going to talk about that. But why did you decide to, have a small child as part of the drama?
So he's Willow's child. He's half Dutch and half American, and he is. I said before that Willow is carrying some secrets of her own and really is protecting them, and he plays a little bit of a part in that. I don't want to give anything away, but he's kind of the reason that she does everything in this book, and so he's an important character, even though he's only 4. And
So why don't you talk to each other? Since you've read each other's books, you say. So, Julie, what do you want to talk to Kimberly about?
I would love to know, Kimberly. I think just really like, how do you get your ideas? Are you like a list maker of your ideas, or do you sort of come one idea at a time?
It kind of depends. I'm usually mostly one idea at a time. Apparently there's only space in my head for one thing at a time, especially for my solo books. Although I co-write books, and I write those as I'm writing a solo book as well. I know. I know.
Okay. Is that a secret?
No, it's not a secret. I've got a series that I do with a couple other authors, and it was originally for Audible exclusives, and now it's out from Source Books in paperback and ebook as well. It's called the Young Rich Widows series. It's set in the 80s in Rhode Island, about 4 women who are married to attorneys who are partners in this law firm. Their plane goes down, and the women, who have every reason to not really like each other, inherit this law firm, including a $4 million debt to the mob. Mm-hmm. And so it's fun, it's campy, it's big furs and big shoulder pads and big hair, and very, very 80s. And it's a blast to write. And I kind of bounce back and forth between that and my solo book. And at some point, usually in that process, both projects catch momentum and go really fast. And I don't know what it is. It's like this magical thing that happens. And I love it.
That doesn't happen to me. I did one Audible original when I was writing the Ghostwriter, and juggling 2 books was absolutely impossible. I got so angry every time my Audible editor would email me with something. I'd be like, what do you want now? And I just thought, like, I can't do this. I can only do 1 book at a time. And it doesn't matter if it's a short story, or doesn't matter. I have to just one project. I get spread too thin.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I think it helps that that it's set in the 80s, so it's very different than, something like this. But it also helps that I have co-authors. And so, because writing is such a lonely thing. You sit in a room all by yourself with voices in your head, and, that's part of the process, good and bad. But when you're co-authoring a book and you run into a plot problem or something that you didn't think of, you've got 2 or 3 other authors there who can brainstorm with you, and so it's a lot less lonely. I really like it.
So do you write under one name or all your names? Or
We write under all our names.
you do?
Yeah.
Well, such a secret. We don't have any copies here, so I just want to, sorry about that, had I known. So who are the other authors?
So Young Rich Widows is with me, and Vanessa Lilly, she's actually the brain behind it. She's the one who put the group together. She has a book coming out in the fall called, I can't I think
Book
Blood
about her
Sisters.
Cherokee heritage because she
yeah,
was here for it
yeah,
last year. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Very good book. Set in
Yeah.
Oklahoma.
And the
And
sequel is coming out, I think, in October. Was it Blood Sisters or was that the first one? I can't remember, but it's really good. And then Kate Holohan is another author, and Lane Fargo. And Lane actually just stepped away. She got really busy with her solo books and had to step away. So it's a series of 4. The first 2 are written by all 4 of us, and then the last 2 are written by just the 3 of us. Okay, well, I know the answer to this too, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, I read in an interview, I think, with you that you kind of loosely sort of base this on a real life. Can you? And I know
Yeah,
you don't want to talk about.
I can
too
talk about that.
specific.
So in the 70s in Santa Monica, there was a brutal murder um, of a high school senior and a seventh grade girl, and they came home after school one day and there was an intruder in the house, and it was just a tragic wrong place, wrong time. And the book isn't based on that, but I grew up, it was one of those like urban legends where, the kids would talk about it and we'd be like, which house was it? And, I mean, every time I drive by the house that I thought it was for decades, I would be like, oh, yeah, there's the house, that. And then finally I was like, I wonder if that really was the house. And so I did a little research, and it's really hard to find information, so please don't try. And it turned out it wasn't the house at all. And so once I started kind of digging, I realized that one thing that I didn't know, that none of my friends and I knew at the time, was that there were actually 3 kids in that family, not 2. And the middle brother had been away at school at the time. And that was really where I started thinking about that idea as a book. Like, I wasn't going to write the book of their murder. It was just a horrible thing that happened. But what intrigued me was what something like that did to a middle sibling, to one day wake up as one of 3, and that night you go to bed as an only. And so at that point, Vincent Taylor was born. The real family and the real middle brother grew up and had probably a lot of therapy and has a lovely, happy life. But of course, that doesn't make for good fiction. So Vincent Taylor grows up to be a very famous horror author and has a ton of baggage and a ton of trauma because he was there when the murders happened. So, but I try to be very clear that the book is not based on that family. The book is not based on those kids. The book is the idea, and it's the idea of what happens to a sibling when you suddenly and tragically and traumatically lose the other 2. Like, what does that turn you into, and how do you move on from that? And also the trauma that creates, like physically, genetically in your DNA. It changes your DNA permanently. And how that gets passed on to your children, and how Vincent ends up parenting Olivia is not great. But he did the best he could with the tools he had at the time, which I like to say was cocaine, alcohol, and a lot of money. So, not great.
I also saw a post, I think that you did, where you went to visit.
I did.
Yeah. Tell us
Yes.
about that. That was actually kind of brilliant social media marketing.
Vincent Taylor actually has his own Instagram account. It's called Vincent Taylor Official. He's not there a lot because he's super pissed that a book was written about him. I try to tag him in the trailers and whatnot, and he got mad at me, so I had to stop doing that. But I had my book event up in Ojai last Saturday. And so one of the big parts of the book is sort of the location of the family home, the Taylor family home. which backs up to what is now the Ojai Meadows Preserve. But back in 1975, it was just this giant expanse of undeveloped land between the neighborhood houses and Nordhoff High School on the other side of the field. And it was filled with like marshland and trees and shrubs, and the kids used it to get drunk, to get high, to hang out, probably to have sex. And so the Taylors, that was their backyard. It was literally their backyard. And so I went up on Saturday. I went up early. It was 95 degrees, and I was walking
It's
around.
cold.
I
Wait,
know,
wait,
it was
stop.
awful. I was dying. And I walked around, and the cool thing was I took a lot of videos. You can find them on my Instagram. But there was one as I was walking, and you can see the houses over on the other side of the field. And there was just this 1 footpath that just led off toward the houses. And it literally was just like, oh my God, there's Poppy's path. That's the path that they used to walk. And then after I kind of wandered around there for a little while, it felt kind of like a little sacred place that, because they feel real to you after a while. I mean, they are real. And then I decided I wanted to go over to the east end of Ojai to kind of take a look at Vincent Taylor's house. And so I did that and took a video of pulling into his driveway, and then posted a bunch of pictures that he was kind enough to let me take of the inside of his house, that were pulled off of Zillow. But it just makes it feel real to me that, they feel real in my head. And, June 13th is the 50th anniversary of Poppy and Danny's death. So it stands to reason that the book comes out now to celebrate. Again, Vincent's still not happy
So,
about
but a
it.
key difference between the real event, right, and the one you're writing about is that the middle child was not a suspect in the
Oh, no, absolutely
original
not. They
crime.
caught the guy, and he's in
Right.
jail. He's still in jail. We looked it up. He's still there.
Right, but in your book,
In my book, he was. Yes,
and
he
that
was.
would be even more ghastly if you lost your siblings,
Yes,
but everybody
yes.
accused you, or you were.
Well,
you
there
were
were a
thought to
lot of
be.
reasons why people suspected Vincent, and they weren't wrong to suspect him. He was the kid whose older brother was magical and handsome and popular and smart, and then his younger sister Poppy was the baby of the family and cute and precocious and ambitious and smart. And Vincent was kind of in the middle, and he was awkward and he was shy and he had a temper, and kids thought he was weird, and he just didn't fit in and was angry about that. So
Yeah, but I'm just saying that his trauma would be greatly amplified by
sure.
the fact that people thought he might actually have killed his siblings.
he never, he denied it with a rock solid alibi, but his lack of desire to talk about it didn't help. And the fact that he stayed in Ojai and sort of leaned into the creepiness of it also didn't help. It was almost like he didn't really care that much and almost welcomed it a little bit for, the sake of being a famous horror author. What better marketing is there than being the suspected killer of your own siblings?
So cynical.
It is.
No.
But I
But it worked for him.
That's my job, Barbara.
I know. So, talk to us a little bit about being a ghostwriter, because there was a really good book a year ago, January, called The Busybody, which was, in fact, about a ghostwriter. Robert Harris wrote a book, in fact, called The Ghostwriter. And there have been, Philip Kerr wrote a book about a ghostwriter. So, I think there's a certain fascination among authors and readers about, how do you inhabit somebody else's voice, somebody else's, persona and world. Michael Robotham, who's a marvelous British crime writer, has won 3 gold daggers. I think he's the record holder. The whole bit. Got his start. He and I always talk about this because we do all these book launches here. Virtual, because he's in Australia, so you have to master the time difference. It's always a problem for everybody to remember that 4 o'clock here is 10 o'clock the next day in Australia. But anyway, he wrote 14 bestsellers as a ghostwriter for British, I think primarily athletes, but that was when that was not acknowledged. So you had to sign an NDA, and the ghostwriter's name never appeared on the book. So it looked as though whatever the Liverpool soccer star was, actually wrote his own memoir. Right there is a certain amount of fantasy going. But anyway, but now I think ghostwriting is recognized and doesn't always have an NDA.
I don't think they have NDAs very much anymore. I tried to put one in, and everybody was like, "Take it out. You don't need it." There is an understanding, though, and as a ghostwriter, ghostwriters depend on their reputation to get them more work. So if you are a ghostwriter that has loose lips, you don't get any more jobs. So they kind of honor the requests. And Vincent makes it very hard for Olivia because he tells her that he's the only person that she can talk to. She's not allowed to talk to anybody else. And if she were to violate that as a ghostwriter, she would lose the job. He would sue her, and she would really be in a ditch. And she knows her father would not think twice about suing her. And so, ghostwriting it's fascinating because how can a writer capture the voice of a perfect stranger, basically? And it comes with a lot of time with the person. You have to build a lot of trust. And you do have to talk to the people around them, because people always hold things back, whether they say they're being honest or not. There's always a part of the story that they're not telling you. And they also aren't always accurately remembering things. And so finding that same incident, so a ghostwriter might ask you, tell me about this situation that happened in 1975. And then the ghostwriter would go talk to 4 other people who were there as well, and then figure out where the truth is among all of those stories and try to get as close as you can. And again, your reputation is everything as a ghostwriter. And if you can't portray an event accurately, you don't get jobs. So Olivia's really stuck. Her dad isn't remembering things accurately. He won't let her talk to anybody else. And her reputation is already trashed. And she's hanging by a thread. And yet she has to get this book right, or she will be finished for good.
Okay, so basically we have 3 different forms here. We have the biography where it's really clear that somebody else is examining, like Walter Isaac, writing, Steve Jobs or whatever it may be. Then you have a memoir, which in theory is a person writing his or her own life. And then the ghostwriter, I guess, it's sort of a memoir, really, but written by somebody else.
Yes.
So it's not as objective as a biography.
No, and it wouldn't be. And the difference is that with a memoir, a lot of times people want people to believe that they wrote it themselves. And so as a ghostwriter, you honor that. You are the quiet voice and the narrator on the page. And then the person takes the book out of your hands and their name is on the cover and everybody says, Prince Harry, you're such a great writer. And the truth of the matter is that, they didn't write the book. They collaborated on the book heavily, but the ghostwriter will meet with subjects for many, many months, over the course of many, many months, many hours, and then they go away and they work on what they learned. And then they go back and they review and they talk, and then they go away and they work. And it's not just, you don't sit down and bang something out in 3 months.
Sure. I mean, there's kind of a fiction parallel. It was a real surprise to everybody when Dick Francis' wife died, Mary, and everybody finally figured out that Mary actually wrote the Dick Francis books, and Dick was the jockey and the person who provided, the actual information. But the reason you knew it was that the voice went. Hers was the voice of Dick Francis, and that was a complete secret. And there was a lot of that where you would have what looked like one person writing a book, but it would be an unacknowledged. And for a long time, James Patterson did not acknowledge that he had co-authors. And then finally, he was forced to do that. And then from that, I think now mostly co-authors are acknowledged. But
For
it
fiction, a lot.
yeah, exactly. But it used to be, I mean, I remember we had Betty Ford. Betty Ford wrote a mystery series, right? And I knew when she came that the whole thing was going to be, real fiction in the sense that she didn't write the book, and then the person who did write the book wasn't here. And I felt really, hypocritical, hosting that event. I mean, she's a lovely lady, and I admired her for her bravery and talking about her personal trauma and all the rest of it. But it was uncomfortable presenting her book as though she actually wrote it. So there's a lot less of that now. I think social media makes that really hard.
I think so, but I also think that, as a ghostwriter, that's the gig. That's what you get paid to do. And it's understood that that is how it's going to be. And so you go into it knowing that your name's not going to be on the book. And a lot of ghostwriters write books for some very unsavory characters, and they don't want anybody to know that they were the ghostwriter for that book. I know several who wrote books for people that we would all be like horrified by. But it's a job and it pays well. And, for writers who want to be a writer, it's a way to go.
It's actually a great way to practice being a novelist,
For
which
sure,
is what
yeah.
Michael Robotham will. Actually, Chris Pavoni and I talked about that the other day, and he wrote Ghost wrote two books before he wrote The Expat, which turned into an Edgar winner. But it was a wonderful book. Although I have to tell you, his new book, The Doorman, I thought Two Nights in Lisbon was going to be his forever best book because it was so unbelievably brilliant. But I think The Doorman is a perfect picture of New York and the oligarchy that we are currently encountering. So, but I didn't realize until we had this conversation. Well, you can watch it because we just had it last week, so you can watch it on our Facebook or YouTube. That he had written a couple of memoirs, to kind of get going. So, there are unacknowledged memoirists, ghostwriters, and then there are, upfront ghostwriters, the whole nine yards, right? So, before we take questions, what are you working on now? I always assume that there's another book in the works, but maybe not.
There is. I am currently working on my next solo book, and it is about, I can't really talk too much about it because I'm deep in the weeds, but it's about a couple that is is facing infertility, and they find I don't know what's going on with my voice, and they find a donor, a sperm donor, who does maybe not have the best intentions.
Where is it located? Is it in the U.S. or some
It's
other?
going to be in the U.S. Yeah.
Aha.
Yeah.
So my claim that you write international thrillers is just shot
I
down.
am not done with the international thrillers, for sure not. But this next one is stateside. Yeah.
My next book is a speculative thriller that is a little bit undeveloped at the time, but it will involve a physicist who has invented a way to remove your energy from your body, send it back in time so that you can redo a fatal mistake that turned your life to hell. And then you get to live your life forward having made a different decision. It's sort of based on the idea that all timelines exist at the same time, the past, the present, the future, but every choice you make branches off into a different timeline. And so she chooses people who have made a very terrible mistake, and she works with them using hypnosis and meditation, and then the energy gets sent back where it finds you in the past. And you don't know that that's what happened to you. You just kind of wake up one day and you feel a little different. And instead of going to the liquor store that night where you were in the wrong place at the wrong time and you've been accused of murdering somebody that you didn't murder and have been spending the last 30 years in jail, you are, violently sick and you don't go out that night. And your body and your intuition tell you what it is you need to know so that you'll make the different decision and move forward. But the problem is that you go back a different person, right? Like, you can't completely erase the things that you know, and you can't completely erase the intuition of the choices that you made that were wrong. You don't know, like, oh God, tonight's the night that I'm going to go to the liquor store and be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You just sense things, right? Like how you have intuition about things where you're like, this just doesn't feel right. How do you know that you weren't sent back in time to redo a mistake that you shouldn't have made? But but the people who have gone through this are struggling because their entire identities have been sort of changed overnight. And, they lose relationships, and family members can't understand what's wrong with them, and they feel ostracized and othered, and they lose a huge part of who they are. So it's not just like a speculative like thriller, it's more of a book about identity and choice. But my main character goes back because she says she wants to go back for one reason, but it's really to kill somebody. So
There
Oh,
we
there's
go.
a wrinkle.
there it is.
There it is. Okay. Because I was just thinking, your first book, you were really interested in people who could, change their lives by, in that case, by swapping identities. Do you all know that there was an alternate ending to, was The Last Flight? Do I have the name right? Yep. I'm so old, the titles are really hard for me.
I know.
Anymore.
They're hard
Patrick,
for me too.
Patrick usually has to
I
leap out,
wrote the book.
to tell me what is going on. But for those of you who read The Last Flight, do any of you read the?
It was a pre-order campaign for the book after that, The Lies I Tell, and if you pre-ordered it, you got a little insert with the alternate ending to The Last Flight, and that came about because I was getting a lot of emails from readers with very, very big feelings about how the book ended, for better or for worse, and I always did play with the idea of writing the alternate ending, maybe for the paperback edition or just for fun. And so we decided to do just a little quickie, and it was fun. It was really fun.
But clearly, that's something you really like to explore.
Oh,
People,
yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we all would like to go back and have like one shot at erasing one terrible thing that we did.
I mean, I think that we all have one thing that we might have to think about it a little bit, but yeah.
Every once in a while, when I have that moment, because there's several things I feel that I could certainly have done better. My husband, who's a realist, says to me, he said, if you hadn't done that, we wouldn't be here. And so I've tried to learn to live with those things that I, wish I could have done differently, because the truth is it would have altered, because any little thing alters the trajectory of your life.
Yeah, it's kind of like a be careful what you wish for
Yeah.
situation, which I
Yeah.
love.
So I'm sort of putting that on the page and seeing where it goes, but it's hard because there's a lot of rules. Like
A
how.
lot of words, a lot of
Well, a lot of
rules.
words, a lot of rules, but like how does this work? And how do I get people to believe this? And so, what happens if this? Like, somebody's going to email me about something, and I'm going to be like, so
Stand
takes
by your
time.
work.
Yep,
You
it takes a
really
lot of
do.
time. This one's going
Right.
to take a while.
So, questions from all of you. Kimberly, you want to be the MC?
Yeah, thank you. Who's got a question?
We need you to repeat it for the camera, too. Come on, guys. Don't just sit there.
Well, for the camera, so you can so we hear it.
So how do you come up with your ideas? Like you said, your new book's about infertility, and your book is heavily about murders.
Just one.
So how closely are those related to experiences that you've had or that you've witnessed or that you've, had family members kind of help you along the way?
I don't think mine are related to family members at all. I just have a very vivid imagination. So a lot of times, like my boys, when they're riding in the car with me, all growing up, we would be making up stories about the person in the car next to us. And I'd always end up saying something really disturbing, like that guy has a body in the trunk. And they'd be like, Mom, but like, that's just where my brain goes. He looks a little shifty. And, where's he coming from and where is he going? And sometimes I'd be like, let's follow him. And they're like, don't.
So I kind of am in the same thing. It's not anything personal, and it's usually something that I come across or read. But with this infertility story, the idea kind of sparked when I heard about you have these groups on Facebook, which are basically there's one called Sperm Donor USA, and you have to join. It's a private group. But it's basically people posting on the wall, I'm 23, you know, 6 feet tall, whatever your statistics are. I live in Scottsdale and I'm willing to travel up to 40 miles. Contact me if you want my sperm. And then the same with women who are like, hey, I live in blah, 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 and I'm looking for someone who's Latino or whatever. So it's kind of like a weird dating site for free sperm donation slash.
It
It's
really
just
is a book that would have to take place in the United States because
Exactly
the United
why.
States is the most under-regulated country when it
That's it.
comes to sperm banks, sperm
That's
donation.
it.
They have very few
Yeah.
regulations placed on them, and so they get away with a lot of shady
Yeah.
stuff.
But I'm kind of like Julie that way, you know, and every other thriller author I think would say the same. Like, I hear that and I'm like, what? I have to write a story about this.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many different ways this can go. So yeah, just kind of took off from there. So.
Have either of you ever been hired to be a ghostwriter?
No.
Okay. Did you do a lot of research?
I
Because the
did.
book was very
I
detailed.
did. I know some ghostwriters, but I also there's a podcast about ghostwriting. I found it. I was very happy when I found it, and it's this ghostwriter, some guy, and he interviews his fellow ghostwriters, and they talk about process and problematic jobs that they had, and how they got into the business, and what are some strategies that they use to get a difficult subject to open up. And so I would just listen to episode after episode after episode, and till I could kind of get a feel for the job, and then start picking and choosing what I probably would do if I were a ghostwriter. How would I handle those things? And then I was ready to write Olivia as a ghostwriter. So yes, lots of research.
I loved her character. Thank you. And this is a side note. Did you ever see the movie? Oh, excuse me. Did you ever watch the movie The Ghostwriter starring Pierce Brosnan and Ewan McGregor?
No.
Okay, you may need to watch that. My husband has had us watch it probably a dozen times over the years. He loves it. It's kind of a fascinating story. So I don't know. I didn't read that book, but is there a politician? And he's Irish? Yeah, it's his book then. And the acting's phenomenal in it. But yeah, I think you'd find it. I'd love to hear what you think of it.
I think being a ghostwriter sounds really complicated to me.
It sounds too hard. It sounds
Yeah.
too much like writing a report.
Yeah.
You know, I'm done with that.
Yeah. I like making stuff up.
Me too.
But I mean, what would happen if you didn't like your subject?
You
know,
don't take the job.
well, but what if you took the job and then discovered that you
Yeah.
know you really
Yeah,
didn't
you're under
like the
contract.
subject? Or I know, but it would be hard to write. It would be hard to do the job well if you discovered that either you didn't like the character or there was something that
Yeah.
they were hiding. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, or
I
in your character's case, and I'm sorry, I can't remember her name.
Olivia.
Olivia.
That's okay.
But when she knows or suspects that her father is maybe not telling her the truth,
Right.
then what do you do?
Right. Well, yeah. You have to make a decision. Like, am I going to be able to write this book, or am I going to protect my reputation and
Yeah.
basically live in my car?
Yeah.
So let's decide.
quiet group. Goodness. All right, Patrick, are there any online questions? You haven't emerged from your lair, but oftentimes there really are.
Okay. Yeah, one of them is, do you know regarding ghostwriters what happens if the person that you're contracted with dies before the book is complete?
I don't know, but I would imagine that there would be something written into the contract like that for projects that involve people who are alive and then might suddenly be dead. And I would imagine that they may publish it posthumously. The editor would finish it up with the ghostwriter and other family members and probably still publish it. And
Right.
probably, I would say, it would probably do pretty well because people would eat that up. Voice from the dead.
Let me add another wrinkle, too, that a lot of it might depend upon whether the author has created a literary estate, because lots of authors do not. And then the question arises, if they die, who owns their property? Can their family
Mm.
do something with it? Or, I urge all all authors, right here.
I don't
That
have
no,
one of
but you
those,
but
yeah.
you absolutely should. And there are decisions like, do you want anybody else to write your character if you're writing a series or something? And if you don't, you need to prohibit that. Who gets the money? Is it your family? Can somebody else, take over and write your work? Legacy publishing. There are all kinds of things. You really should talk to somebody about it. But I'm pretty sure that that would apply in a ghostwriting situation. There would have to be some, um, the heirs would participate in that decision.
So the sperm donation racket, I mean, that is absolutely fascinating. Do you think that, I'm sure there have been couples unintentionally who met and then became couples based on
Oh,
that?
wow.
And
Write that down, Kimberly.
maybe had a kid together. Do you tell the kid how they met? I mean, that's
One of the things that I found in this Facebook group is they talk a lot about AI and NI, artificial or natural insemination. So there are a lot of lines being crossed. Some of the donors are saying natural insemination works better, which I don't know if that's true statistically or not, but it's creepy. I can write a whole book about it.
You really could. I am already thinking about some lurker on that page.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
So J.T. Ellison's last book for HarperCollins was about a woman whose husband
Yep.
is suddenly suspected of, and it turns out that he is one of many children of a sperm donor. So when they ran the DNA, they
Yeah.
brought many people into the net.
Right.
It was a very interesting story.
Well, and that's, you mentioned it, that it's very unregulated. So there's, nobody is regulating the actual sperm banks. When you go and you pay a lot of money for sperm, nobody's really regulating that. So the sperm bank can say, oh, we only allow a donor to have so many kids. But really, who's keeping track? How do you know that they're telling the truth? There are just so many ways it can go wrong.
Well, and the other part of it too is that excuse me. The other part of it too is that they don't do any follow-up health checks.
Yeah.
So you fill out the form and you're what, like 21, 22 and you're in no, I don't have a history of cancer. No, I don't have heart disease. No, I don't have this, but I didn't have cancer at 22 either, but I had it at 44. So, there's no follow-up to sort of find out so Joe, how are things? Are you still doing good? Any heart attacks, any strokes, any bunions, what's going on?
And there are all sorts of legal issues too.
Yes,
I won't
yes.
get into all of them, but I mean, there's so many different ways
Yeah.
the story can go.
Yeah.
I'm having a lot of fun with it.
The only other question was about, I guess for both of you, what is your relationship with social media like?
What is our relationship with social media?
Hustle.
Yeah.
That's a good word. No, I appreciate talking to readers on social media. I'm not on. I have a TikTok page, but I don't ever go there because TikTok scares me. You open it up and it just starts screaming at you. It's very loud. It's jarring, and so I don't do that. But I am on Instagram. I left most of their platforms. I'm on Facebook, but very rarely. Instagram is really where I am. That you can find me, Julie Clark Author. But it's fine. I don't love it, but I don't hate it.
Yeah, I think it depends on the platform. I am on Instagram. I actually like Instagram. I think Instagram is fun. I like looking at pictures and videos. I love TikTok. I just don't love posting on it. I do it occasionally, but I'd love to scroll. I mean, how else do you fall asleep if you don't scroll TikTok?
I watch Friends. Like a
Read a
normal
book.
person.
I read a book, so there we go, proving my age, right? It's an interesting question. Social media, it's hard to live with it. It's hard to live without it. I think we all have to have, our own decisions about how you want to do that. Right. Well, thank you all very much for coming tonight. Now, I have, as is my usual want, quiz question. Okay, because I have a book to give away. I'm going to be talking to Meg Waite Clayton about Typewriter Beach, which is going to be our July notable new fiction book. And it's set in 1957 in Carmel by the Sea, and Alfred Hitchcock plays a role, and it's time for the blacklist, and all kinds of awful things are going on. And then in 2018, there is a screenwriter who's back in Carmel by the Sea, and once again discovers, hidden secrets, dynastic squabbles, all the rest of it. Really very good book, and she's going to be talking to Laura Dave. And we have not actually done an event with Laura. She doesn't write crime fiction, but she's a really interesting writer, so you all may want to.
Is she going to be here?
No, it's going to be a virtual event, but I think you all might want to watch it. It's at the, it's the end of June, and it's on our calendar, but and you don't have to watch it, at 5 o'clock. You can watch it. Actually, I have worked out, looking at our figures, that most people watch our events the next morning over coffee. So it's kind of like a literary morning Joe is how because we go to like maybe 200 or 300 people watching it live to 12 or 1,400 people watching it by noon the next day. So it's not that hard to infer that that's what's going on, which I think is great. Anyway, a question. Oh, Lord. All right. Do you have a brilliant question that you'd like to pose? Or even a not brilliant question? Just a question.
I'm drawing a blank, but anytime you say like, "What's a book that you've loved recently?" I can't remember anything. So this
Okay.
totally tracks for me.
Who came the farthest to attend this event live tonight? Where did you come from? Well, no, Kimberly wants the book. No, it's supposed to be for you guys. Yeah, no. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a thank you for those of you who came. And since I get literally dozens of these every day, when I was gone for 3 weeks, I got 53 advanced new reading copies. So I can't even kick my way through my office, so I love giving them away. I saw a tentative hand. Okay. Anybody further than that?
Wow.
Denver versus California.
I'm gonna
Oh.
have to Google that one.
Well, I'll tell you what. Did you come? Which author did you come for? Assuming you came for Julie. You came for Julie. Okay. I have a Julie arc here I could also give away, but I didn't get one for Kimberly, so I can't offer that up. Do we have another advanced reading copy up? All right. So I will pass this back to the lady in the blue shirt, and then we'll find a different book for the lady from Denver. You're welcome. So, thank you all very much for coming tonight. And if you'd like to get your books signed, if you guys would fold up your chairs and put them on that side of the room, because they slide off these bookcases and could really hurt you. And then you're welcome to take pictures, get your books signed, chat with the authors, all the rest of it. Have a safe trip home.
Thank you. Do you want to stay in here? Yeah. Okay. It's just easier that way. Okay.